about going out here schmoozing this, how to get a gallery interested in your work. But with Instagram and all of that, like you don't need that at all. You know, if you are on your Instagram game well, like you can survive as an artist, hands down. And I find social media and all of that has also changed the kind of work that is being produced because the people are actually producing work specifically for Instagram. It doesn't translate into a gallery space. It translates well for Instagram. So different kinds of artwork are being created. You know, technology is playing its role. So I think it's wonderful. I feel sorry for the galleries, but I look forward to what that looks like with augmented reality and virtual reality. What gallery spaces can begin to look like in the future.
Just in a sense, then social media is adding on or is sort of forcing artists to be more creative and to be more innovative in their processes.
Yeah, it's like an inevitable change that has arrived, and now it's either adapt or you know what happens if you don't adapt. So I think that's what the situation is, and what that is doing is that it's forcing artists to think outside of the box and think about different ways that art can manifest.
I agree fully with what Komi is saying. I think it's it takes the gallery, like the third person or whatever amount of people out of the mix, and just what Komi was saying, gives artists a space to create specifically for the online space, and I think also it makes the artists even more visible. So and accessible too. I mean, you know, we know how it works. People can now DM and directly relate to somebody or directly comment on someone's work. You don't feel the type of intimidation that a gallery space might have you feeling based off of, you know, going to the AGO or whatever gallery space is. So it's more approachable, it's more accessible, you know, all the good things. Yeah, and some weird things, but yeah.
I think building off with what you guys have both said, it's removed the middleman of marketing. It makes it a lot more easier to use these apps to get your work out there, but also with collaboration as well. I feel like a chunk of the people I've worked with in other parts of the world, it probably wouldn't have been possible without social media, right? The ability to, you know, DM or email someone from New Zealand and end up meeting them maybe somewhere in Nigeria to do a project. Like, that wouldn't have been possible without social media. I mean, it could have been, but let's be honest here, right? So social media has allowed us to put our work out there and really expand on our following, our audience, but also leads to a lot of offline relationships as well that you keep for a long time. So that's great. The only thing I'd say about social media, though, I'm not sure if we're going to discuss it later, is the idea of crediting and the idea of you know, making sure artists are credited for every repost. I put out that project recently, and it was a really big team. And what I find is a lot of people are either just crediting me or not crediting anyone at all. And it's on really big, like, pages with really big audiences and really big followings. And it gets, you know, down the rabbit hole, and it becomes a thing where people are reposting it, and then the photo loses its quality, it's pixelated. And before you know it, it's on Tumblr, and no one knows who the creator is. So it kind of leads into that aisle as well. So a lot of artists refrain from putting their work up because of that reason as well. So it's kind of like a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, that was my next point. And just even moving beyond the crediting part as well is, in as much as social media can be great for sharing work and it's making your work more accessible to the audience, and you know, also providing you the platform to engage with a lot of other artists in different parts of the world, I do have a criticism of social media in the sense that when your work is being reposted, it can be reposted without credit, but even for me, what's worse is that it can be reposted outside of the context that it was created in the first place, right? So have you, as an artist, experienced any scenarios with your work just kind of being removed from that context and just sort of just floating out there in the internet? And
I had back to the same project just because it did really well recently. I think the day after we put it out, someone used it for a flyer for a party. It's pretty quick. But you know, they put together a flyer. It was a party, and I think it was in, like, I don't know, Connecticut, and like it was just completely in the wrong direction. And when I spoke to the person to take it down, I did it very politely, and the person was like, "It's just a flyer," and I was like, "It's only day 2, a bit of time." You know what I mean? But yeah, it was a bit frustrating from that perspective. I mean, I love the fact that people are appreciating like the photo for what it was, but at the same time, it's like it doesn't really fit the initial idea. You know what I mean?
So I had a series, a Sesame Street series, where I was depicting Sesame Street characters as Africans.
Yeah.
And I was new to Instagram at the time, and my brother was encouraging me to put up all my art. And I put up this painting that I had of Kermit the Frog. And my brother messaged me about 2 or 3 days later. He's like, "Oh, yo, your painting's a meme." I'm like, "What's a meme?" And I go and I find out what a meme is, and not that there was anything wrong with it, but this was like during the Kermit time, sipping the tea and stuff. So obviously it was taken out of context. I wasn't mad about the context. I emailed the guy, and I told him, I'm like, "Oh, this is plagiarism, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'll credit you." But by that time, the internet had swallowed it up. And yeah, so that was the story about that.
I find like with, and I see this a lot on Instagram, like I am on Instagram and I don't engage with Instagram at all, just because I'm very introverted in a sense. But one thing that I find and I've noticed with Instagram is that there's always that sort of a push for like wanting to create an aesthetic, whether you're not creating any work whatsoever, whether you're just consuming other work. It's wanting to create a general aesthetic on your feed and wanting to, get followers to come and just kind of increase your own visibility within that platform. So in the context of an artist's work being removed from its own original context and being removed and not being credited to the artist, I find that that could really just do a disservice to you as an artist.
I went for a social media kind of event, and they were talking about like the whole drive for Instagram and Facebook is original content. So they encourage artists to produce original content. But when you look at that from the broader scale of things of other people that are not artists, they also need to produce original content. So it's an opportunity to curate. So I'm not mad at those people that have these pages that it's not their work, but it's curated. And I think it turns out really beautiful sometimes,
Any additional comments to that before we move on? It wasn't really a question in as much as a comment, right? So it was just more a lot of the consumers of visual work on Instagram. So maybe they're not creating any work, they're just consuming other artists' work and creating sort of a feed within their own page and creating a general aesthetic within, in that, and just to attract followers, to attract people to their page. If your work is then removed from its content and sort of positioned within a feed as that one, I personally think it does a disservice to you as an artist, and it does a disservice to the work and the weight of the narrative behind your work. And just wanting to hear more about how you've experienced that, and if you have any issues with it.
I do have to leave shortly, just noting. I think we probably need to start thinking about a new language to talk about ownership, copyright, permissions, all those things, given the era of social media. Like all of us have said in some way or another, the internet swallows it up or it goes down the rabbit hole, and then like it's some bizarre place you never imagined. And I think it does do a disservice to the labor of the artist and the genius behind the creation of new work. And so because of that, we need to figure out ways to talk about it differently, I imagine, just because it's so it's almost an unavoidable thing. Once it's online, like Facebook or Instagram or whomever owns part of the rights to it, then the internet just takes it and does whatever it wants to do with it. So how do we control that? Like how do we maintain those that ownership. And I think, I don't know, I imagine that there just needs to be a totally different way of either interacting with the internet as artists, and the removal of the expectation that our work will always have the proper credits associated with it, or like Komi was saying, that we are producing almost exclusively work that we know is going to go on the internet, and not necessarily work that we are, I don't know, that's precious, that's more precious to us. So I'm torn with that. I'm not sure. I just think that we are in such a the cusp, or even probably the entry point of such a new time, that we need to start thinking about how we really interact with this differently, and what our expectations are of the internet.
Okay. I do have one last question before we end the panel, and then I can open the door if you guys have any additional questions to ask the panelists, and we can go ahead and just do that. The last question that I want to ask, you did mention, Anique, the need for, I think actually three of you mentioned it in some one way or the other. You mentioned the need to actually have a network, or to have a space that you can actually engage with outside of social media. So in as much as you can have a following, you can have an engagement, you can have networks that you can work with across countries, across continents, it's still really important to have actual physical connections that you can engage with on a daily basis. Do you feel, my question then is, do you feel that your social media platform has sort of allowed you to create, in a sense, those physical, more tangible assets for your work?
I'll say for me, I'm similar to you. I'm very introverted, and so I don't tend to post my whole life on the internet. I do use Instagram, but not in an extensive way, any way, shape, or form. I would like to, be better at that, but it's not really something that excites me. So yeah, I think forms like, I find blogging is a little bit more of like your own sort of property type space, as opposed to more of the social media platforms. But I mean, yeah, it's just a different time. Things are gonna look different. And now I have to go. I'm at another panel that starts soon.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. We do really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and good luck on your next panel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so yeah, just to wrap everything up, so do you guys have like last comments that you'd like to say in regards to the last point? So in terms of your social media network, has it translated to more sort of real life, real time assets that you can use for your work? But even more, maybe more precisely, has it put your work into more traditional physical art spaces? Has social media led to you actually having your artwork in a gallery or into like
just to answer that, I'll say yes to, and it goes in both directions. So I've had opportunities spring from Instagram and social media, international opportunities, and at the same time, being in physical spaces has helped me grow my social media kind of base. You know what I mean? So I think one hand washes the other, but I think in this day and age, an artist not on social media I think you're actually doing yourself a disservice. If you created work for it to be consumed and for people to take something from it, you're missing millions of people by not putting it on the internet. But I understand any reasons why not.
I think the balance is really important, both offline and online relationships, and just online and offline reputation as well. I do believe that Instagram, Twitter, and these other apps kind of act as your online portfolio. Like, a lot of people don't have time to go through your entire website and look up your discography, so they go on your Instagram to see what you have going on. And it has led to a lot of offline relationships for me, very solid ones as well, more internationally than domestic. And it hasn't necessarily led to any gallery space opportunities for me yet, but it has led to opportunities in other parts of the world that have led to commission jobs or whatever it may be. So I'd say, yeah, back to what Komi said, it is really important to have that social media presence and just like using that to your advantage right now, because it's basically free marketing.
Yeah, so that that sums the questions that I had for you guys. I do want to thank you guys again for being here and joining and sharing your experience as artists, as Black artists, and putting your work out there in both print form and on social media. We are just sort of running with time, so I'm just going to make way for maybe 1 or 2 questions if you guys have any, and then we can just sort of end the session. No questions?
I have a comment.
A comment?
I'm not sure if I'm loud enough. I everything is still here. But I just wanted to say that you all are great examples of how you took adversity and refusal and created an opportunity from it. And I think it's a sign of intelligence and exemplary creativity, and it also continues the survival of our African voice, culture, and experience. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, really appreciate it.
So, yeah, we.
I don't need a microphone and it's too that if you guys have any upcoming shows, events in the city that you might want to let us know about, I'm sure you were ready coming in.
Do you have any upcoming shows?
Not
Events that you're
at the moment,
participating?
no. Yeah. But I have my card, so we can talk.
I do have one. I'm just trying to pull it up here. Just give me a second.
Do you want to maybe give it after?
Oh yeah. Okay, cool.
And I can share it on
Yeah, we can share it
our
out.
Instagram. I
Yeah. Okay.
Give thanks. Thank you.
So thank you guys again, and thank you all for being here and sharing the moment. So I'm just going to give the mic back to Tammy, and we'll move on with the event.
So thank you for participating in that panel. Thank you for all the questions. Let's give them another round of applause.